The Pirates of the Caribbean movie series may be based on a simple Disney World ride, but it surprised viewers and critics alike with the rich and multi-layered world it created. The first movie in particular, The Curse of the Black Pearl, remains critically acclaimed to this day. Even if some critics have mixed feelings about the rest of the franchise, it's undeniable that its creators managed to infuse the movies with meaning and symbolism. Here's a look at the symbols used in the Pirates of the Caribbean movies and how they add layers of complexity to the story. But ye be warned, there be spoilers ahead. Number 1. The names of the 3 main characters. Looking for symbolism behind a character's name can sometimes feel like grasping at straws, but when all 3 main characters in a movie share similar symbolism, it's clear that it's no accident. Jack Sparrow, Elizabeth Swann, and Will Turner are very different characters, but they share similar symbolism and motivations in the first Pirates of the Caribbean movie, The Curse of the Black Pearl. The infamous pirate Jack takes his surname from the sparrow, the small, unassuming bird common in both Europe and North America, and famous as a symbol of freedom. And that is indeed Jack Sparrow's main drive in the movie, to be free from the shackles of the law, to reclaim his beloved Black Pearl, and to roam the open seas with it away from civilization's restraints. The second key character in the movie, the noble-born Elizabeth Swann, also carries a rather clear surname. Swans are famous as both regal as well as ferocious birds, and that describes Elizabeth quite perfectly. Beautiful when calm and furious when angered, like Jack, Elizabeth Swann also yearns for freedom from the small royal pond her father wants to keep her in. Like a swan, she's not afraid to stand up to anyone to get what she wants. Will Turner's connection to birds is definitely less obvious. In fact, if it wasn't for Jack Sparrow and Elizabeth Swann, we would have happily moved past Will Turner's name without batting an eye. Will's surname Turner seems to refer to the tern, the common seabird often mistaken with gulls. This can seem far-fetched at first, but Will Turner's whole story arc in the first 3 movies is that he turns his back on his grounded life as a blacksmith and not only turns to the sea, but becomes a part of it by taking Davy Jones's place on the Flying Dutchman. So like the tern, Will spends almost his entire life roaming the sea and initially mistaken for a pirate. The Turner surname also relates to the twists and turns Will makes throughout the franchise, from chasing his father's jailer to becoming the jailer himself, from working with pirates to being a pirate hunter, and then switching sides again to working against Jack Sparrow to working with him. The connection to sparrows, swans, and terns is almost definitely intentional, as all birds are associated with striving for freedom, which is exactly what the 3 protagonists are fighting for in The Curse of the Black Pearl. Number 2. The Black Pearl. Jack's most treasured possession in life is his ship, the Black Pearl. That is, in the rare moments when the pearl is actually in his possession. Most of the time, however, Jack is forced to fight tooth and nail to get it back and become its captain again. Given that this is at the core of Jack's story, the Black Pearl symbolism seems rather clear. Black pearls represent infinite knowledge and wisdom, but this isn't the ship's meaning. Instead, the symbolism of Jack's ship is that the Black Pearl is endlessly valuable and excruciatingly difficult to get a hold of, like actual black pearls of the time that people desperately try to fish from the riverbeds and the bottom of the sea. The Black Pearl is an invaluable treasure that Jack desperately wants to find and keep for himself. Number 3. Elizabeth's corset. Corsets are uncomfortable devices that women were forced to wear for centuries. Corsets, therefore, also make for excellent metaphors, and The Curse of the Black Pearl used Elizabeth's corset perfectly in that regard. Early on in the movie, the character is shown getting stuffed into an extra-tight corset just as we're getting to know her. We realize just how constricting and stifling her life is and how much she longs to break free. Interestingly, it's also Elizabeth's corset that puts into motion all the events of the first movie, beginning with her falling into the sea after fainting from not being able to breathe because of the corset. In other words, it's society's very efforts to restrain Elizabeth that paved the way for her fight to freedom.
You like pain? Try wearing a corset.
Number 4. Jack's compass. In a movie where almost all characters are desperately chasing after their most coveted desires, a device like Jack's compass is an object worth having. Instead of showing true north like any normal compass, this magical item always points in the direction of its holder's one true desire. While the 5th movie, Salazar's Revenge, arguably overused the compass, the first 3 movies utilized it perfectly. Not only did the compass symbolize Jack's true goal and the desperation with which he chased after it, but the compass showed us just how desperate every character was to get what they coveted, as the compass changed hands several times and always had somewhere different to point to.
Now, bring me that horizon.
Number 5. The Cursed Pirate Treasure of Cortez. While the titular curse of the Black Pearl may have been a bit metaphorical, there is a literal curse in the movie. That of Cortez's hidden pirate treasure. Cursed by the Aztecs from who the Spanish conquistador stole the gold, the treasure now turns everyone into an undead abomination. The curse can only be lifted once all the pieces from the original treasure trove are returned. While the curse serves as a major plot point of the movie and makes for a rather entertaining final act, it symbolizes the pirates' greed backfiring on them. Not that a single pirate in the movie is going to learn from that experience, of course. The treasure also symbolizes the havoc wreaked on native populations by European conquests of the time. Number 6. Barbossa's Apple. Chewing on an apple has always been a sign that the character in question either has a dark side or is the movie's outright villain. Hollywood has used this trope so many times that it is as much of a cliche at this point as the Wilhelm scream. Why apples? The apple is the most commonly used symbol for original sin and lust, stemming from the story of Adam and Eve eating the apple from the tree of knowledge in the book of Genesis. In the movie, the apple speaks of Barbossa's desire for what he has lost because of the curse, like enjoying the pleasure of the flesh, eating, drinking, and even feeling. But it may also hint that he is a fallen man who cannot extricate himself from sin and is yearning for redemption. The apple could also represent evil intentions and hidden motives, like the poisonous apple in Snow White and the Seven Dwarves. Barbossa is constantly scheming, dishonest, and only has his interests at heart. What's even more fascinating, however, is the use of the apple in Barbossa's death scene. Barbossa not only falls down in a classic overly dramatic fashion, but his hand drops by his side and the green apple rolls slowly down the pile of gold. This is a clear recreation of the death scene in the movie Citizen Kane, often called the greatest movie ever made. We doubt the crew of The Curse of the Black Pearl actually meant to equate their fun action-adventure to the all-time classic, but it is a fun nod to it. Number 7. Norrington's Wig. One of the easiest details to miss in Dead Man's Chest is also one of the best. Norrington mopping the deck of the Black Pearl with his old Commodore wig. This blink and you'll miss a detail is as bittersweet as Norrington's entire tragic story in the Pirates movie, from a valiant man of the law to a heartbroken pirate to a tragic death standing up to Davy Jones. In fact, wigs do tend to bring bad luck in the Pirates franchise, as Dead Man's Chest also shows a cannibal tribesman wearing a governor's wig at one point. While it's unlikely that the wig belonged to Elizabeth's father, Governor Swan, the governor it did belong to probably didn't part with it willingly. Number 8. Will Turner's Sword. Another fan favorite and very subtle detail that appears throughout the first 3 pirate movies is Will Turner's sword. Not the sword that he uses, but the sword he crafts as a blacksmith for Commodore Norrington in The Curse of the Black Pearl. In fact, the very first scene of the franchise we see Orlando Bloom as Will is a scene where he presents that sword to Governor Swan. Why is such a seemingly throwaway item so important? Because if we follow the sword's travels through the movies, we notice heartbreaking symbolism. Will gives a sword to Elizabeth's father as a gift for his Commodore, Norrington, the man Elizabeth is supposed to marry. Norrington loses the sword at the end of The Curse of the Black Pearl when he also nearly loses his life. The sword ends up in the hands of Lord Cutler Beckett, the secondary antagonist and representative of the British Navy in Dead Man's Chest. Cutler returns a sword to Norrington once the latter is welcomed back into the Navy and is promoted to Admiral. In the third movie, At World's End, Norrington manages to stab Davy Jones with the sword Will made for him. He accomplished this feat right after helping Elizabeth escape. Unfortunately, Davy Jones can't be killed by such simple means, and Norrington ends up being killed by Will's dad, Bootstrap Bill, who's still in Davy Jones's service. The latter then takes the sword and notes what a great sword it is. Finally, Davy Jones uses the same sword that Will Turner had crafted to stab Will himself in the chest, mere moments before Jack could finally kill Davy Jones for good. This fascinating series of events leads not only to Will Turner being killed with his own sword, which would have been symbolic enough, but it also results in him taking the place of Davy Jones as the undying captain of the Flying Dutchman. Essentially, Will's craft as a blacksmith, a life he loathed, doomed him to be the captain of the Flying Dutchman, also a life he loathed. Number 9. The Flying Dutchman. A true terror throughout Dead Man's Chest and at World's End, the Flying Dutchman is a frightening ship and a sight to behold. But what is the true symbolism of the Dutchman? According to actual pirate legends, this was a ghost pirate ship roaming the trade routes between Europe and the East Indies through the south of Africa. The legend was especially popular during the 17th and 18th century, the golden age of piracy as well as the height of the powerful Dutch East India Company. The ghost ship was seen as a bad omen. Those who had seen the Flying Dutchman were believed to meet a disastrous fate. Supposed sightings of the Dutchman were reported as late as the 19th and 20th century, describing it as a ghostly pirate ship, often floating above the water, thus the name Flying Dutchman. Of course, the creators of the Pirates of the Caribbean couldn't have the ship be just a bad omen, so they turned it into a terrible force that dragged entire ships down to Davy Jones's locker. Number 10. Jack's Red Sparrow. Those paying attention at the end of the third movie would have noticed the slight modification Jack Sparrow made to his flag. Even though he was once again abandoned by the Black Pearl's crew in Barbossa, Jack remained undeterred. He added a red sparrow onto the Jolly Roger of his little dinghy. Pearl or no pearl, the sparrow is always going to fly free.